Just a couple of housekeeping. Make sure that your cell phones are on vibrate, please. Make sure we have our mask fully covering our nose and our mouth. If you need to use the restroom, our bathrooms are here to the right, ladies' room and the male's room. Of course, tonight is a big night for us to discuss some of the ideas and plans that our governor have to improve our cities. He's coming out to discuss the collaboration of Wilmington education. So please, let's give it up to our very own, our Governor, John Cornyn.
Thank you very much, and good evening to all of you. We appreciate your participation tonight. It's not often that I get to go to an evening meeting where I can just walk a block and a half down the street. As you may know, I've lived at 506 West 19th Street, block and a half from here for about 35 years, and have been coming to Warner for community meetings for that whole time. I appreciate, again, all of you coming out tonight. Tonight, we're here to talk about a concept that we're promoting and hoping that the 3 districts in the city of Wilmington will embrace. The 3 districts, mostly 3 districts, obviously there are 4 that have some portion of the city. Colonial, just a small part, no buildings in the city, and of course, if you consider the high school level, you've got Howard, Votech, and the Votech district, so 5. Basically, we're here tonight to hear from you questions and concerns that you have. We've been meeting with all 3 of the school boards. We've met with Christina twice, and Don's here tonight. You had a workshop as well. We've met with Brandywine twice, and we've met with Red Clay once, and I guess briefly last night, although it was at the very end after a long meeting. I'm here with Jim Simmons, who's the Director of Equity for the Department of Education, former principal up the way at Mount Pleasant High School, and believe it or not, on the freshman football team that I coached at the University of Delaware in 1980, whatever it was, 85 or 6 or something like that. Jim and I have been doing these meetings as a tag team. He'll walk you through a slide presentation to really present the idea and the concept of the collaboration. The background, of course, is that over 5 years ago, there was a proposal that was developed by the Wilmington Wilmington Education Improvement Commission, so-called WEIC, which would have redistricted the 3 districts in the city and moved all the children from Christina and Brandywine into Red Clay. That failed ultimately in the General Assembly, and so when I was first elected governor, was presented with the challenge of what are we going to do to move our city schools forward? What are we going to do to improve education here in the city? Dr. Susan Bunting, who was our first Secretary of Education, visited all of the districts. At the time, I was meeting with members of the school boards, the president of the school boards, and the superintendents of the time. They're all different today. And basically concluded that there wasn't really a consensus about the redistricting question. And as you may know, a commission recently has been set up, the Reading Commission, to look at that question. But we decided to focus on, like, every day children go through your classrooms. And each year, first graders move to second to third. And there's a sense of urgency on my part that the children that were in kindergarten and first grade when I was first elected are now in 4th and 5th grade. And we've not made progress on some of the things that we've wanted to do. We are making progress, I think, in Christina. We've engaged with them to kind of restructure their buildings and to recapitalize the building, hopefully build a new building to replace Bancroft on the east side and recapitalize Bayard on the west side. We've converted Stubbs into an early childhood center on the first floor and a parent support center on the second floor. Pulaski right now is being used as swing space as Bayard gets recapitalized, and Palmer in South Wilmington hopefully will become a training center for the ILA. So we got a lot of work to do there. And in the meantime, we're trying to get approval for the 3 districts to collaborate and with a hyper-focus at the trustee board level, which you'll see in a minute, on children and families here in the city. I don't have to tell most of you. How many are teachers here at Warner? So most of the folks are teachers, so I don't have to tell you the issues that you see in your classroom every day, and our purpose is to bring a hyper-focus to those challenges, and so that we can get our third graders reading at grade level by grade 3, our middle school students doing math at grade level when they get there and go on to high school and graduate and be productive. We also are joined, I should have said this at the outset, by viewers on Facebook Live. I'm not sure where the camera is, and there it is, and YouTube Live, and so we'll take questions for them as well. So think about the questions, concerns that you might have as Jim walks you through this. Again, the focus is this is a local city collaboration, a learning collaborative, where we come together around the best practices to meet the needs of our students. We have a memorandum of understanding already with Christina and with the Christina teachers, class size limitations, additional compensation, and a number of different things that hopefully will enable us to achieve our objectives. So with that, setting the table, I'm going to turn it over to Jim Simmons, who's the Director of Equity at the Department of Education, former principal at Mount Pleasant, and an outstanding University of Delaware football player.
Well, thank you for that rumor. I think I'm a lot better as I gotten older. I was a lot better than I was. So thank you for first taking the time to come out tonight. I'm going to walk you through the presentation in order to garner questions and to garner feedback so that we can answer them. But we want to get information and feedback from those who are actually have boots on the ground and who are doing the work. We don't want to come in with a finished product and deliver something to you and then try to convince you to accept it. We want to build this with you, and so that's where we're going to start. So this collaborative was built out of a number of different, what I believe the term was innovation zones that have been used around the country. Those zones don't really look exactly like Wilmington, so what we did was try to take some of the best things from that and build a framework, and then take that framework and meet with folks like you to say, let's add to the framework and build this and finish it together. Next slide. Oh, I guess I have the clicker. I'm used to having John Sheehan on Zoom. He's my human clicker. So on the screen behind me are a number of concerns, problems, issues that everyone in this room is already aware of. These are some of the bigger ones, and sometimes they are accentuated when you look at what happens in the city. The governor mentioned the number of districts that oversee our city, and as you all know, what that means is you move 1 or 2 blocks and you go to a different school, a different system, a different curriculum. We're hoping that by building this collaborative, that impact of that moving and that transition is reduced to what it does to a student in the classroom. The governor also mentioned the buildings and the facilities. Every district has a different standard for how they maintain buildings. The reason that's important, though, is if students don't come in with an environment conducive to learning, that's already another strike. And a number of the students that we're talking about are coming from conditions that are not, I'll say, up to the standards that we would like and probably that they would like either. And so to bring them into conditions that aren't up to standard doesn't give them that sense of that this is important to them, or more important, that they are important to us. So we've refurbished a number of buildings to try to get those up to standard. When I think about the movement between districts, I always tell this story, and maybe I should find a second story. But when I was the principal at Mount Pleasant, Byron Murphy was the principal at Dickinson High School, if you're aware where those 2 buildings are. And the dividing line was 30th Street. And so oftentimes a student would be at Mount Pleasant, their family would move 1 or 2 blocks over, and now he has to go all the way out to Dickinson. So now, versus a 2-mile drive, he now has a 10 or 11, 12-mile drive. New person, leaves his friends, leaves his teammates, those sort of things. So Byron and I developed a great friendship and a working relationship around calling each other, so I could call, and I'll use Mr. Patton because we're friends from way back. I could call Donnie and say, hey, I'm sending you a student. he's a good kid, wrap your arms around him. And that's what Byron and I did. And Donald and I did that at times when he was at Bayard, if he had a middle school kid that ended up in our feeder pattern. So we hope that this collaborative will reduce that impact of doing that. The other thing that we know is that we're not retaining teachers in our city schools at the rate comparable to the rest of the state, and we've got to figure out a way not only to retain them, but we've got to recruit them. And so we've got to recruit them, we've got to retain them, and the next slide I'll show you some data that talks about that, and I'll talk about why it's important. So if you look at the state average, it's around 66%, which I would argue is not good either, right? To lose 4 out of 10 teachers every 3 years isn't good. When you look at our city schools, and I don't have it memorized, but I think the highest is like 56%, if I'm guessing, and the lowest is around 30%. So if you think about every 3 years, 70% of the teachers are different from 3 years ago. From a principal standpoint, all the professional development that I've done is now out the window. I've got to start over again. All the relationships that have been built over those 3 years with families, you've got to start all over again. That impacts student learning. It also impacts family engagement, because families come in, and I know Dr. Newton was here, I don't know where he went, but Dr. Newton at some time, he's going to be here so long that families are going to say, hey, Dr. Newton's a good man. I'm sending you there because I know Dr. Newton's going to do the right thing by you. He's going to do the right thing by us. But if he leaves and every 3 years is somebody different, that impacts families wanting to stay. It impacts trust. And we know that the families that we're talking about, many of them have school trust issues, right? A lot of them didn't have great experiences in school themselves. So coming back here is an intimidating factor. So we've got to find a way to reduce the turnover rate for teachers so that we can impact those things I just mentioned. Here's what this looks like in terms of a structure. We're asking the big 3, and when I say the big 3, that's Brandywine, Red Clay, and Christina. But we're not limiting to just those 3. If charters want to get in, but we are saying we want to look at the schools that reside in the city limits. Working with those districts or whoever decides to participate to develop MOUs and partnerships to talk about what are the things that we want to work on together, that those districts now have to turn over some level of authority that they're comfortable with to this Wilmington Collaborative. Create this trustee board that only focuses on the city of Wilmington. If we use math as a way to talk about strength in voting, all of the boards that we're talking about have 7-member boards. Christina, Brandywine, 1 city delegate. Red Clay has 2 city delegates. So for Christina and Brandywine, that means 14% of the voting power is for the city of Wilmington. So when issues arise, that city delegation's strength of voting power usually doesn't carry much weight. When there's issues that the superintendents have to look at a global level for their entire district, the city's always last. What we're saying is by putting this trustee board in, which would include superintendents of that district, include their city delegate from their board, community members, parents, teachers. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like. That's why we want to talk to folks and gather information. But all of those folks would have a focus only on the city of Wilmington, and then create a small staff that oversees the day-to-day operations. It's important to hear that the schools stay in the district that they're currently in. We're not taking anyone, we're not taking Warner out of Red Clay and putting it somewhere else. You're still going to be a Red Clay school and belong to the Red Clay School District. What we're saying is we're going to add this extra layer of support for those schools that decide to participate. What could it look like? One, it depends on who decides to join. I say who's going to join with us to get on the right side of history. We hope that all 3 districts decide to do it. I talked about that targeting staff. I don't want to talk to you. Here's the empowerment piece that's important. Too many times, we've done things for and to people, but not with people. Donnie told me to make sure I said that and gave him credit. We want to empower teachers who have boots on the ground to say, you're going to be part of the decision making. It could look in many different forms. We call them educator leader teams or whatever the case may be. Again, when I was the principal of Mount Pleasant, we had committees that talked. We had a discipline committee, we had an MTSS committee, we had these different committees so that I had teachers around the table that helped me to make some decisions, but it had their input, so I knew exactly what I needed to address, and I didn't make those assumptions. We need to get families at those tables because we oftentimes make decisions for them, but we don't know that's what they need or want. So we've got to get them around the table as well. Flexibility. This was one of the ones I think I got to really take my time and explain when we talk about extending the school day. By no means are we suggesting in this plan that we want teachers to work longer hours or longer years. You guys work extremely hard. There's a woman at my house right now working on lesson plans every night. My wife teaches chemistry at Mount Pleasant High School. So I fully get it, and I'm a former teacher. What we're saying, though, is we've got to extend the school day for students by giving them enrichment opportunities. I use my son a lot because I can talk to him and I'm not violating any confidentiality rules. But when my son was young, he's a better than average baseball player. Because of that enrichment of baseball, he went to kindergarten understanding fractions. Because I would tell him, if you get one hit out of every 3 times you go to bat, you're batting 33%, you're going to Hall of Fame if you can do that for your whole career. He's about 250. But those enrichment opportunities matter. When students get a chance to apply what you teach them in some activity, they remember it and they learn it better. We already know that. What we do know also is that the students in the city have missed out on a number of those opportunities. So I firmly believe that we have an achievement gap because we have an opportunity gap. And we've got to find ways to get those opportunities to those kids so that they can be enriched. The collaboration piece we talked about, the governor talked about that a little bit earlier. When I was the principal, again, that was prior to the state mandate of professional learning communities, but we were fortunate enough to put some of those in place, and I saw the impact that it made around certain content areas. All of our science teachers together, all of our math teachers together, working on different things, whether it was lesson plans, common assessments, and it moved our scores drastically. Imagine if we did those professional learning communities with this school and that school and this district and that district, and we were able to get the best and the brightest citywide versus just school-wide or district-wide. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to do that because we know that you guys know what your kids need. So we know that this isn't going to happen from nothing. So at no cost to the districts, no cost to the taxpayer, this is all going to be state funded. Some additional investments around early learning and pre-K and full day kindergarten. We're looking to invest there. We know that opportunity funding is going to be ramped up over the next few years. I think it started at $25 million, and correct me if I'm wrong, and it's going to move up to $60 million around extra supports for special ed students and ELL students. We're willing to do that. We talked about curriculums that could be common if the people who participate decide on a common curriculum. We're going to fund that cost. Professional development. We've got to really look into digging into not only professional development that's one time. I think we've got to change that mindset that professional development is ongoing, and we're going to take on the burden of that cost as well. The other thing, and I hit that too early, the other thing I want to mention is when we talked about teacher retention, the number one reason that teachers and educators either leave buildings or districts is because of poor leadership or poor policies and procedures. So we've got to not only give professional development to teachers around curriculum, we've also got to grow administrators. Some are where they need to be, but they can always get better. I think everybody has strengths and weaknesses, and whatever your strengths are, you should spend time in professional development around your weaknesses in support of your teachers. What I do know is we've got to spend more time not asking teachers why they left. The better question is why just stay. Because if I can find out and gather enough information about why you stayed and apply that to new teachers, new hires, and hope that they stay, then that becomes a win-win for everybody. There is one other slide, maybe two. All right, so this slide talks about what the governor shared earlier. We spent November, December going around to community-based organizations, school boards, presenting this, collecting information, and I often tell John Sheehan, who I thought I saw walk in the room, we should show folks the first presentation and the last one, because sometimes people go, well, you're having these meetings, how do we truly know that your information, or your feedback is being used? Well, if you look at the first one and the last one, you can see how that's changed over time, and it continues to change as we gather information. We're asking school boards to allow their superintendents to engage with us in developing an MOU that they would then later on in January, February timeline vote to either say, yes, we're in, we agree with the MOU, no, we like that tweaked or not tweaked, and hopefully no one says that we're not in, right? So that's what we're looking to do. Then we're hoping to get this up and running by July 1, which is our fiscal new year for schools, and start in September. That's a quick turnaround, but what we're saying is we don't hope to have it finished and up and running, because that would be a rush process. We're saying let's get it started and continue to build on that and develop it as we go on. The last slide is what you may already know, is we're having a number of these different meetings. Monday we were at Pulaski. We're here tonight. Next Monday we are at Harlan, and then at Bancroft on Tuesday. But all of these meetings are not only live, but on Facebook, YouTube, and you can go virtually and see them as well. I'm going to turn it back over to the governor, and feel free to ask any question, any comment, feedback. We're taking it all. John looks like he's scribing on his phone for any of the notes that we need to get. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. I'll make sure that you all have my email and cell number. If you leave here tonight and something else pops into your head, and you're like, I wanted to ask this question, feel free to reach out to me and or John. We'll make sure you have our information so that you can reach out to us as well. So, Governor.
Thank you very much, Jim. Yeah, give him a round of applause. We've been working hard on this. John came late because we had a Zoom meeting with teachers from Christina School District, and they had some additional questions. Jim and I had to leave and run over here, and John stayed around. So John and Jim and I are here to answer any questions that you have. We take advice as well and concerns, so please feel free. We do have Facebook Live, and I don't know whether any questions or comments are coming in yet, but we suspect that there will be. So with that, if anybody wants to lead off and ask the first question or make a point, we're ready to go. And we've referred to Don Patton here as a Christina school board member who's come to our meeting at Pulaski and here again tonight. Don, we appreciate your participation and engagement. So if you have
if there's going to be an overseeing board specifically for the schools in the Learning Collaborative, does that mean that that board, the trustee partnership board, would have the authority to make decisions without the regular school board from what the district is?
Yeah, so that's a relationship that we have to work out in terms of the legal relationships there, but the idea is for the local trustee board to be hyper-focused on what's happening in this collaborative.
Yeah, exactly right. Wow, exactly right. Is that Sarah under the mask there? Sarah, so good to see you. And Sarah, Governor, was actually at our virtual visit on Friday and got to hear some of the exciting possibilities for this. So as I think Jim showed on the timeline, our hope and ask of school boards is to vote to essentially agree to partner by January, and that doesn't commit folks to anything. It's just a sort of decision that we're going to try to work together in partnership to lift up these schools, these educators, and these communities. And then the work that you're talking about, the really, I think, difficult work of figuring out the exact responsibilities is going to happen in that MOU process. So that's going to be something that we're going to have to work with the districts and make sure that we devise a sort of shared responsibility aspect to it. So that's going to be really hard work that's coming, hopefully, January, February, March. And thanks again for making the time on Friday to join us, Sarah.
Can I ask a question back to you? What did you think about Friday?
Well, I think it's really hopeful. I think there's a lot of potential, but my concern is that instead of it being giving authority to the schools, you're going to have two processes to go through now to make the decision happen.
Yeah, so we heard that exact same thing in the meeting that we just came from, and I kind of look at it differently. I look at it, we're going from one to a different kind of one. Now, obviously, there's a relationship between those two, but I wouldn't envision it as two separate things in that respect. But
And the concern is, as you're writing it, to fully empower these schools, there has to be an authority from the trustee board that they can make decisions for city schools without having to go through the regular district, otherwise.
exactly, and that's the rub.
Yeah, and I think part of that gets worked out, and Sarah, true full disclosure, is a former student of mine as well. So I was 12 when I taught her, so they're everywhere. Part of that process is including their superintendent and their board member who oversees the city, so that the districts will have, the district board will have some input into those decisions on the trustee board. I think having them there says that their thoughts and views are being represented on the trustee board as well.
They're right there.
Hi, I'm Tricia, and I work with the early years program downstairs, the preschool program. But I also, my primary job right now is as an itinerant teacher visiting community sites. And so right now I visit the Latin American Community Center. In the past I've visited Hilltop, and I serve kids in the city. So I'm curious about the pre-K investment part, and if you could paint a little bigger picture about that in terms of what that means for district programs, but then also what that means for city programs.
So we've made a commitment to increase ECAP seats in the city over a period of time. So that's one big piece. There's, separate from all this, there's an initiative more broadly to expand and improve early education. I think most of us agree that that's got to be an essential part of this. We've actually had preschool entities come to us and say, can we be part of the collaborative? My response to that would be perfect, because we've got to have a connection. Yours is connected, right? You're just on the other side of the building. In fact, we had one of our teacher sessions, we had teachers from that program that were fully engaged, wondering how things were going to change, and you're already at capacity, all those things. But to me, that's got to be one of the, I'm not going to be the one saying how that works out, but it's got to be a top agenda item for the trustee board. Because we know that children are coming to your classrooms in kindergarten, I guess preschool, I don't know how many ECAP seats you have, but with significant needs and different than some of their suburban counterparts. And we also know that over the last 2 years, there weren't, a lot of those children weren't going to those early education centers. And so what I've heard from teachers is they've come in now to kindergarten, first grade, and they're just behind on their, all the social, relationship part of it.
I believe Wilmington had its own school district before, so is this a lead into Wilmington having its own school district again?
So I mentioned at the outset the Reading Commission, which is looking at all those questions. Here's the problem. My father was an educator, and he spent the bulk of his career working in the old Wilmington Public School District. I'm going to guess from sometime in the 1960s until DSEG in 78-ish, at which time he was reassigned to what was initially called Area 1 and then Brandywine. So he retired out of Brandywine in the late 1980s. The court declared Newcastle County's system illegally segregated because in 1968 the legislature had established the City of Wilmington district, actually at the request of city legislators, and separated out the suburban districts, which then the city district became racially identifiable as a super majority minority district, right? And so that was determined by the federal judge to be illegal. So they separated that out. Well, the state was released from that order, I want to say somewhere in the end of the latter part of the 1990s, just before 2000. And the legislature passed the Neighborhood Schools Act, which basically says children in the city of Wilmington have to go to the school from grades, I think, K to 5, the school closest to where they live, unless the district has an integration busing program to do it differently. Only Brandywine has that kind of a program. All the other 3 districts go by the Neighborhood Schools Act. So Reading is going to be confronted with this. WIAC basically confronted it and said, let's move Christina out of the city, and let's take the Christina students and put them in Red Clay. Brandywine would keep its involvement on the north side. And so you have a consolidation of city families and students into 2 districts. Reading Commission is going to make recommendations to that effect, would have to be approved by the boards and the General Assembly. That's going to be hard, right? And it could implicate, I'm not a lawyer, but it could implicate legal issues. My approach as governor was, I don't want to wait for all that to happen. I want to move our city forward and set the table for whatever Reading might decide to do. If they decide to try to go to a single Wilmington school district, I think that's not legally permissible, or some other configuration. So I'm sorry that that's a long-winded answer, but there are legal issues around whether you could have, there are lots of people who say, we want a Wilmington school district again. And what I don't want to see happen as your governor is I don't want to be in federal court again, because it's a lot of wasted time and energy and confusion. And I want to move forward with a collaboration that everybody says, these are our children, we care about them, and we're going to do the best by them. And I believe that we can do it. I think we're stronger working together that way across districts. If you have a, can you go back to if you have that city-centric trustee district, you get the focus that you need and the collaboration that you need across the district line. Do we have, bureaucratic things to figure out, legal things? Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the process of the MOU. In the back, Emily?
Hi. So with the previous year, the pandemic year that our children missed, and them being behind and trying to catch up now, with this new plan you have, is this going to increase their class sizes? And are you going to provide additional support in terms of teaching staff to assist the students?
So what it did in Christina, our MOU with Christina, is lower class sizes. Again, I don't want to prejudge what the collaborative board might decide, but my guess is more resources, more support, and lower class sizes, not the opposite. Well, you got to put more teachers, and you divide the number of students you have with more teachers. The state funds that, yes. We probably have some, I'm not exactly the exact relationship we have, but most of the funding, so the new schools that we're building, 100% state funded. In Christina, I want to say, where's John? 15, is it?
15 to 18. Between 15 and 18 in the lower grades.
What is it in Red Clay?
Well, the state is like, K to 4, it's like 24. It's a state law. In some districts, the boards, if they go over 24, they've got to vote. They got a waiver. Thank you. So it's mostly 24 or higher, because most districts take the waiver. We're talking 15 to 18 in Christina. Now again, I don't want to prejudge what, but that's, you think about it, that's kind of the starting point, right? We're already working under those conditions. That's the way I look at it. Okay, I'm sorry, ready?
So you mentioned that before all of the schools shut down, and you're actually moving Christina District into, they're staying out into basically the suburbs. Can you tell me exactly how many schools are going to open back up in the city within Christina School District? Because I'm aware that Bayard is getting work done, so you guys open Pulaski back up. Bancroft is going to shut down because they're building a new school. So right now, that's 2 schools. Right now, I know they're using, what is that, Sarah Powell, right? And then the school in South Bridge closed, and Longshoreman is going to be using that.
Correct.
So in addition to Warner and Harlan, if this goes through, how many total schools is that going to make with this Wilmington Collaborative for the inner city children?
So I would anticipate Bancroft and Bayard, they're moving kids around, in Christina. In Red Clay, it's, I always want to say Cool Springs, it's Lewis, Warner, Shortridge, and Highlands, right? Somebody help me. I'm sorry. Joseph E. Johnson, and then it's Harlan and PS. So it would be a similar configuration. What we hope, what I'd love to see, is more parents decide, I'm bringing my children to the brand new Bancroft right here.
What grade is Bancroft going to be once?
1 to 8. They're 1 to 8 at Bancroft, 1 to 8 at Bayard.
So we're talking. So Christiana right now, they are 1 through 8. So
Correct.
Warner is 3 through 5. So what another concern is, and I'm a parent, is you're telling me that you're going to have 1st through 8th grade in one building?
Correct.
So with the maturity of children, you already have 3rd through 5th and then 6th, 7th, and 8th. Where is that leadership, or how is that going to be stationed with all of those different ages? You got hormones coming into play,
So
different things like that. So how is that?
I'm going to turn it over to the educators, but these were issues that we dealt with in Christina, and it was the teachers and the principals working with our team that came up with the configuration, and John and Jim can help explain how it works.
So we're not mandating that buildings conform to, that all buildings will be 1 through 8. So in this case with Shortridge and Warner, they may stay with the same configuration that they're in, and they can still participate in the collaborative. We're not saying that you have to be a 1 through 8 building to participate. We're just saying at this point, it's going to be K through 8 or 1 through 8 that we're working with the understanding that we're going to work on the high school piece that we know is a whole another conversation.
The high school, I'm speaking of the different age differences.
Right, and so that was an issue I took over for Darrell Green, who was in this seat prior to becoming the superintendent for this district. And that was an issue at Bayard and Bancroft. What's that going to look like? And over the course of the 3 years, all the issues that we were concerned about weren't those issues. We put a bus aid on every bus because that was one of the concerns that the parents had. And so we wanted to make sure that the bus drivers can get them there safely and not have to worry about this supposed, suggested, hopeful situation with the age group being an issue. It did not become an issue. The building structure, the principals, I don't want to say it's a school within a school, but they're on different floors so that they don't interact, and it has not been a problem in the 3 years that I've been in this role.
Okay, and since we mentioned buses, since everybody's aware, the buses are now on strike. So, okay, that's fine. They came off, great. But my question is, we're not trying to limit a feeder pattern. So how is the transportation going to be within the city? Because you have children, you have east side, the north side, the west side, South Bridge, Riverside. How is the busing going to work? Like, are we going to be full buses? Or is it going to be a bus for 1 through 3rd or K through 5? Like, how is the busing system going to be? And I'll use an example for like Odyssey. Odyssey has separate buses for certain grades. So is that like, has that been talks, or that's still premature? Like, how is that going to be in the works with getting the children to and from?
So that we haven't decided that, but as the current structure is that the buses the transportation would remain the same. So just because we're in this collaborative together doesn't mean that now one transportation company is overseeing the buses. Christina would still pick up and deliver their students to their schools. Red Clay would do the same, and Brandywine would do the same. Unless, once we collaborated, those folks who decided to partner with us came up with some suggestion that they thought would be better in the best interest of kids. But at this time, the thought was that the schools remain in their districts, the transportation would still be the same in terms of getting them to school on the buses back and forth safely.
So, just an example, I'm over the north side, so if I wanted to switch my child into one of the Christina school districts, basically I would have to provide them transportation.
Again, I think that's something we could work out. That has come up. That's the current policy around choice. But again, I think in this collaborative, if that was something that all 3 districts decided that they wanted to work through, I think that's something that they would have to work through at the table through the MOU process.
It seems to me that issue itself is one that's very unique given the closeness of the neighborhoods and some of the issues there that a collaborative would want to wrestle with and come up with the best approach. No, the questions are great questions, very practical.
Hi, I'm sorry. My name is Kendra Brown. This feedback of what she said about Vancouver and Myers. So when they do open back up, how big will the school be? Will the school be just a 2-level school? Will it be like separate buildings? Would it be, because my concern is the safety of the students and the staff. So how can we keep them safe with so many different age levels in one building? Because we know the 1st and 2nd floor is not working.
So in the current plans, and I'm not sure that they're finalized yet, while they're 2 separate buildings, it's one building separated by, so you know, in K to 3 or K to 2, you can't have them on the 2nd floor, whatever the rule is. And so they'd be on one side, and then they'd have common areas, i.e. the gym, the auditorium, but then the middle school would be on the other side. In Bayard, they have certain grades on the 1st floor, 2nd floor, and then 3rd floor. So they're separated by floor in that building.
Right, but my only concern with that would be how are we not eliminating the school spirit and the environment of the middle school being collab with the elementary school so close? Because they do 2 totally different things for them to have to share everything. I don't even see how it's even working with them sharing one gym, one computer lab, one library. How it's only 8 hours in the school day.
Yeah, that's a scheduling thing that the principals and the teachers would work through. I've never worked in a 1 through 8 building, but what I suggested when I first came into this role, when Bayard and Bancroft were transitioning, was I said, let's go visit Brandywine Springs, which has been a 1 to 8 building for 20 years now. I think it's been that long. And that has not been an issue. And I think the feedback that they got from them, they applied to their 2 buildings, and they've managed it so far with the current buildings. So I imagine that they would apply that as we got the new building and the renovated building.
But Brandywine Springs is not a Title I school. So how do we compare Brandywine Springs with our Title I schools that are understaffed, underfunded, undersupported? Brandywine Springs has all that they need for that to happen. So who else are we comparing that with to be successful?
Well, I was talking about just the structure of using the facilities. Again, I think we've got to get around the table, and some of those issues that you bring up around the issues that a Title I school that could bring versus a non-Title I or a fully funded, and we find out what those issues are so that we can address them through that MOU in this process.
Right.
One other thing, you mentioned underfunded. We just talked about how there's going to be more funding.
Right.
Lower class sizes, more support. So that you got to keep that.
I'm not disagreeing with any of the plans. My only thing is how are we going to make this happen when we're underfunded and we're understaffed already? Like when we open back up and all the plans go into effect, what are we doing to make sure that our students have enough staff, that they have enough police presence, that they have enough resources, that they're getting what they need at home, or we're trying to get them what they need at home? What are we doing to help them as a whole human being? That's the only part that I just don't get. And I know we're working on it, but I feel like we just keep on dumping our kids into stuff that we are still working on as they're coming in the door. And we should already have these things already set out before they even come in the door. So not saying that your plan is not great, because I think it is, but I just don't think that we fully think about everything before we say yes.
So, two things. One is, you're exactly right. We use the example of Christina. Again, it's more funding. It's additional support, social emotional support for the children. It's additional support in classroom. It's lower classroom size. That's what's happening there right now. Right at the end, you said, how can we support it if we don't know what it's exactly going to look like? That part is all about empowerment, listening to teachers to determine exactly what it's going to look like. Otherwise, it's me coming in, or Jim, or educators, it wouldn't be me, coming in and saying, okay, we're going to do it this way, and that way, without engaging you. We know that teacher retention, the teacher component, is the most important one in terms of attracting teachers, keeping them here, and one of the most, if not the most important factor there is engagement and leadership. Leadership that does engage, that listens, that supports. And that's what this model attempts to do. Trust is a big thing, and that's what we've got to prove. You can only gain trust by delivering the promises that you've made, and that's what we intend to do.
Hi, my name is Melissa. I'm a teacher here at Warner Elementary, and I guess my question is, I see that you guys are going to, we are understaffed and underfunded, and I see you guys are going to be putting things into place to fund us more, but how are we going to attract educators to come work in the city and keep the educators that are here? Because all of us who are here who work Title I, we know Title I schools are much different than the schools that aren't Title I. And what I hear is lower class sizes, more resources for the children, and as a teacher, what that sounds like to me is more work for us, and we don't mind working, we work hard, but what things are going to be put in place so that this idea of attracting new staff and this idea of having more resources for our children doesn't just turn into the ones who are here and who stay are just getting more work to do? Because that's what happens a lot.
Yeah, it's an incredible, John Sheen again. It's a really good question. I want to give you a few specifics, but if it's okay, I also want to ask you for advice, because again, to the point that was just made, like, you are living this every day. I want to hear from you, and we want to hear from you what is going to work and what's going to help take work off your plate so that you are enabled to do the job that you love. One thing that I think has been really impactful throughout this process, we had a great presentation from NEA, the National Education Association, about shared decision making and models where educators are at the table making key decisions. And the work that NEA has done, New Jersey has actually done a lot of work in this, in empowering educators to really have a seat at the table and help make key decisions. And the results has been greater retention rates, greater student achievement, and greater morale. And so NEA presented to us, and I know that they're excited to help support what that could look like here, and that's a big thing. But I also want to say, I think we all want to know from you and hear from you, what work can be taken off your plate so that you can be supported to do your job. So I would love to use this to get your advice.
I don't think it's necessarily taking off of our plate. I think it's offering us more options. So I know working in a Title I school, social and emotional learning is a big thing for our students, because our students come to school not just with academic deficits, but there's a need there for social and emotional. And that push is great, but we need the help in the sense of having a para, having someone in each classroom that is just for that classroom would be amazing, because it's just one of us and maybe a para who can help here and there. But if we're going to be doing this work, we need more boots on the ground, like you say.
Yeah, I'm sure it won't surprise you. The governor shared, I just left a call with educators from Christina School District, and that exact point came up. And when you hear something from a few educators, it means it's something that needs to get addressed. So I appreciate that and appreciate you echoing exactly that point. And thanks for the work you do every day, by the way.
Hello. I have a couple of questions. We met before online, and we were talking about why we were moving so quickly. And since that conversation, I have thought over and over again about the multiple programs that we have started in school that took longer to do than what we're rolling out. Just starting AVID programs, or just even our RTI process that we're doing here is taking time to do that. So again, I'm saying, and everyone that I've spoken to feels the exact same way. If we're going to take the time, if we're going to spend all this money that we are still wondering where is it coming from, because if we have this money, why aren't we using it? Why are we holding it back? You know, that doesn't make sense to me. So if we're getting new money, we need it now. You know, we don't need to wait to use it. And then second is that process that you're doing is like going to be rushed again, because now we're going to waste all that money. In our opinion, the people I've talked to, we're going to waste all that money trying to put Band-Aids on bullet wounds. So I agree with what this lady said here, and I think we're all echoing something like that. Sounds like a great idea, not opposed to it. I don't think anybody, yes, we have very transit population. It would be great if we could go from one place to the other. It would be great as a teacher if the same programs were in one school from the other, if I wanted to go from one to the other. That would be great, but that takes a lot of time, that takes a lot of money. Just finding the board, like I feel like I'm sitting here wondering, what are you really asking us to do? Because every question we have is kind of like the board will decide, or that person will decide, or that person will decide. And when we get to that point I feel like it's kind of like a timeshare type of situation. Like I'm going to see the fine print later, and I won't know, it'll be too late. And I don't even think it's really up to me to decide, because really it sounds like the district is going to decide whether, or the board is going to decide, and I'm going to just have to go along with it. So I don't see how it's collaborative, and if it is collaborative, then it needs to take time, because you got to find a curriculum. That's going to take time, because you're pulling all these different people together, and then you've got to train your teachers. That's going to take time, because there's nothing worse than having a curriculum, and then you're going to judge me on this curriculum, and I don't know how to teach it. And you've got behavior, so you've got to train me in behavior issues, academic issues, and I've got to get a system in place, a schedule, like all of these things, and I'm very low level on trying to make schedules, and I know it takes time to do those things. So it's very hard for me to believe here that it's just going to work like that, because it never does. And I think they're worth it working. You know, they're not worth us just starting something and figuring it out along the way. We do that already. We do that already. Every day, we do that, and they deserve more. They get that at home, some of them. They get that in the city, you know, just going around, just figuring it out. So if we're going to do it, we might as well do it. That's my, you know.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is, or third was, one of my coworkers had the question, how is it going to impact Warner? Like, it would be good if we actually had straight answers so we know when we're walking away, like, what does this mean for me as a teacher in Warner? Like, how is that not, like, what board am I going to have to talk to? Like, how is my life going to change?
Yeah, all good questions. Can I take the timeline one first? Because I felt like I didn't do a good job on that Zoom last week addressing that one. So I feel like I left folks, and we left folks with the impression that this is all going to be done immediately and dropped, you know, for year one and, you know, be done. And that's not the goal. The goal this year is really to hopefully have the votes in January to move forward with exploring a partnership. And the goal of this year, I think, is to set up the structure that will hopefully empower you and your colleagues and work together on what are those year one things we want to see. Creating a new curriculum, getting folks trained by year one, not going to happen, right? That can't happen. That would be unfair and wouldn't work. Oh yeah, and you have curricula, right? So I would imagine that the curriculum that you're currently using, you would continue doing that in year one, and we would say, let's say it's class sizes, it's a para in every room, and we pick a few things that we really lean into in year one and build up to the shared curriculum, build up to some of the other supports, and really make this sort of a process that as we go, we get better and better and stronger and stronger. Remind me of the second question. Oh, how does this impact a teacher at Warner? So we had, and happy to share it with folks, when we had this conversation with folks in similar collaborative partnerships across the country last week, we heard from a teacher there and asked that exact question, how does it change? And she really talked about the autonomy and flexibility she has in her classroom and the support she has to help make key decisions around budget, around staffing, around the supports that she and her students need. And so I think what you hit on is a challenge for us when we present this, which is, as the governor said, we don't want this to be us telling you, here's what you need, because you're in Warner every day, you know what your students need. And so it is not top down, it's really leveraging your expertise, and sometimes that's hard because we need you to help us build it, if that makes sense.
Let's talk about something very specific. How many kids are in your class? So you don't have a normal class of 24. What does anybody know what the normal? About 20 to 23. So presumably we'll have an MOU that looks like Christina, and it'd be 15 to 18. Okay, that's different. How's it going to affect you? It could be the case that we'll have additional resources. We will have more opportunity funding for the board to decide how do you want a deployment. I heard everybody universally say, how about more paras in the classroom? We got resources. That'll affect your classroom directly. Two things just in terms of funding that we know is coming. It's not hypothetical. That's new. That could improve the condition in your classroom.
Hi, I'm Maureen Darlington. I'm one of the school psychologists here. I was wondering how this learning collaborative and the MOU compares or contrasts to the Christina MOU. I know that's just within a district and this is multiple districts, but just kind of trying to piece it together. And then kind of along those lines, is there data to show that the MOU model, if there is a similarity, is working in Christina?
Yeah, so let's start with the second question first. And I wish I could say that we had good data, but we had a pandemic. So the bulk of the time, we're also spending a lot of time, building a new school and rehabbing the others, and et cetera. I gotta believe, I don't have data that says this, that our early childhood center is making a difference. I know that families are being supported by the parent support center on the second floor at Stubbs. Would I like to see more families helped by that unit? Absolutely. But to your point, what are the third grade reading scores now compared to then? That's what I focus on. We got to get our third graders reading at grade level, right? Just so hard to tell when you had a pandemic for 20 months and you weren't in school, and so. What was the other part of your question?
How does this MOU compare?
Okay, so so the thing that's different, so we have an MOU with Christina and with the teachers at Christina, right? So it's two. In fact, the teacher MOU was just upgraded, right, John? And so that contains the things like the woman we were just talking to, I'm sorry, I didn't catch her name, with respect to class size and additional supports and flexibility and that kind of thing. Then there's the MOU. There'll be an MOU part that defines the relationship among the three districts in terms of the governance. The lady your friend who left, who was next to you, was worried about that too, the different authorities there, which would define that. Does that answer your question? So we would envision an MOU with Red Clay or Brandywine similar to what we have with Christina. It might be different because they might have different priorities, and then you have your trustee board over the three districts that would start to look at common approaches to the issues. One of the things that also will be different, you're a counselor, is the additional resources for counselors just passed in the last legislature. That's for all schools. What's that? So I'm sorry.
That's okay.
School psych.
But there are, different races.
I should know that. My father was one. And additional funding through K-3 basic special ed. So additional resources there as well. Yeah.
Governor, could I just take one question from YouTube real quick? How will you continue to ensure that the concerns and recommendations of the community are being heard and addressed moving forward if the districts decide to join the Wilmington Learning Collaborative?
Yeah, parental and community engagement is a big part of it. In fact, with the design of the new Bancroft has a lot of interfaces with the community to engage in that kind of way. But it's a principle, I guess, more than anything else that the collaborative is based on. Yes, sir.
So basically, I'm just going to go off of what she was saying. Like, y'all are telling us all this stuff is coming and it's going to be smaller class sizes and all that good stuff. Sounds good. And like they both said, it sounds like good ideas and everything. But at the same time, we're going to roll this out by next year from what I saw on the screen. And to attack this that fast, there's no way this is not just going to be a reactive situation. We're just going to be reacting instead of being proactive. And I feel like that's what she was saying. Like, we need more time to push this forward if it's going to be that effective. If not, we're already reacting to the pandemic still. Like, we're still reacting to it. It's still happening every day. Like, so we're just going to keep reacting. When are we going to become proactive? That's my question. When are we going to become proactive?
Yeah, the answer is that's what this is designed to do. And I know that's going to sound
I understand, but
inadequate.
at the same time, like with the design that you're showing me, like it's going to become reactive very fast. And I'm a teacher, I'm just letting you know, like from my first hand being in the building and we do things every day, it's going to become reactive very fast. Because we don't, like, you can't even tell me what it's going to do for us as teachers besides smaller class size, maybe a pair in every room. Like, what else? Because that's not going to solve everything, trust me.
Thank you.
I just want to say, because I come from Christina and I have friends in Christina, I feel like a lot of what we do at Warner, those teachers that's in the MOU, they're doing the same thing. The advantage is they're getting more money for doing it. And they do have the smaller classroom sizes, so in that way it would benefit because they are compensating them for what they do. The one thing I want to know is, with the pandemic, you have to do something different. Will the schools have autonomy, like the charter schools, and say, I want to focus on a thing? Could we have all girl classes or all boys? Or could I have a transition grade because the kids aren't ready to be pushed on? Could we have a 4th and 5th grade? If we're going to have 3 classes, can we have a 4th and 5th grade class? Those are the type of things that need to be done to make a difference, because if not, we're going to keep doing the same thing, but we're not performing, and we're trying to get to the place where we're performing.
So we used to actually have a slide on the presentation until we cut it down that gave examples like that, different themes, this again would be ideas that were developed by the board. And y'all want to tell me want me to tell you exactly how it's going to be, and I understand that, so you can wrap your arms around it. But the whole structure is how it's going to be, you all develop. You all tell us how it works. And she's shaking her head because she doesn't trust, and that's really fundamentally the issue. Well, but see, that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about a collaborative that is among the schools here in the city of Wilmington, not from Brandywine Springs and places like that.
Now get those kids that are from a higher income bracket that test higher because of all kinds of other stuff that we could spend another town hall about, but would increase our test scores and give us a different advantage when we compare schools like Brandywine, because those kids are gone and they've been gone. And so I feel like for me, are we actually going back in history? Because that's a big concern for me.
No, the purpose is to go forward and to go forward with a model that works.
So now we're going to have communities further spread apart, and that affects everything. It loses kids' empathy. They don't know, they don't understand. How can you have all these kids that don't go to college, and they'll finally meet somebody from a different walk of life at 18 years old, with all these pre-biases, predispositions of what they don't know. And here we are. We're here. I live in the community. I teach in the community. I love this place. And I have a real fear that we're going backwards, not forwards. As much as you want to tell us we are, I'm just not seeing it in the data, the slides, whatever you say. I'm just not seeing it. And so, yeah, it is a big trust issue.
Yeah,
Just words when it looks like there's already a plan in play, and it's like, let's get the support from the community first, so we can roll out the work that we've already started.
Other than to say that there's not a plan in place behind the screen, and that the plan is to be developed by the board, like ultimately, I guess you're just going to have to trust what we're saying is the truth, which it is. We're answering any question that you have. The question is, your question is, how's it going to be? What's that? How many kids do you have in your class?
You're saying that we have smaller class sizes.
Yeah, like how
That's my second invitation.
I got 3 that are probably not identified properly. Come visit. You know my babies. You know my babies.
So, Governor, with all due respect, we hear what you're saying.
Okay, one at a time.
And like we all said, we just want the best for our babies. We are here by choice, okay? We choose to be here. We choose to love on our babies and provide them with all that we can. So in all due respect, we are going to be mama bears, papa bears for our babies, number one. Number two, I had 12 kids in my class today. So that's a small class size. And I had a parent in my class today. And I still had fights in my class. I still had issues in my class. I still had kids having to get removed from my class. So smaller class size does not always give an answer. Parent in the room does not always give an answer, okay? Yes?
So what is the answer? What would you like?
The answer is we need to collaborate, all of us, not just having these town halls. You need us on the board, right? So it's equality, and talk about what is going to work. This fact that you have this whole timeline with dates and months is a problem for me, because it comes off that you already have a plan no matter what we say, and you're humoring us with
our conversations with you. And if that's not the case, I would watch how you present it.
That's
because
not
that's how
the
it's
case.
coming off. I hear you, but that's how it's being perceived from the population, from the teachers, from the parents.
All I can
from
do
the
is tell you
community.
what the truth is, yeah.
And we don't agree with the fact that it should start in the year.
It sounds like you're trying to sell this like we're building it together, and we ain't had nothing to do with none of that timeline. We had nothing to do with it.
But on top of all of that, I think that we still need to think about, we are in a pandemic now. We didn't see this coming. It came out of the woodworks, okay? We had to pivot, which we did effortlessly, I must say for my colleagues, onto virtual with the staff, with the kids that we had. We had to pivot, come back into school with kids who are, she had 8 kids in her class today because they had a quarantine. We're still living in a pandemic, with all due respect. Please give us time to figure this out. We have new curriculum today. We have new RTI things. We have new programs already coming into place because we're in our mind normal, but we're not there because life keeps pivoting for us. And we're expecting our kids to pivot with us, and they're kids. They're resilient, yes, but they're kids and they're going through a lot. We are going through a lot. Everyone is going through a lot. We need to slow down, really, truly look at what's going on, pause, and then come to the table because your urgency was 5, 10, 15,000 years ago. It's not happening right now. We're in a pandemic. Sorry.
Yeah, I have a sense of urgency about it, and I appreciate your input. And obviously, we're here for just this purpose, not to throw something at you that's predetermined. And all I can do is say that's the truth, and it is.
Right, Ms. Clark, sorry, she was my daughter's teacher. She was phenomenal during the pandemic year, I must say. I just wanted to emphasize what she said because I don't know if it's coming across to you. Maybe it comes across different from a parent versus from an educator. You have the gentleman that spoke earlier, I can't remember your name, I'm sorry. He said, he gave a great quote that somebody else said to him, you know, we have to include you. So, I'm paraphrasing now. We don't want to talk at you, we want to include you in our decision making. That's inaccurate, highly, because you have an entire timeline that nobody was in on when you created. So we're not seeing what you're saying being inclusive of us. We're seeing that you're saying this is what we want, fall in line. And I think that's an issue that we're collaboratively, collectively having, where you have created this plan and this timeline, and now we have to fall in line with your timeline. And what Ms. Clark said, can we revisit this? Can we truly collaborate and come up with a different timeline? I'm not saying this won't be fantastic. It probably will be. I don't know. But your timeline is too fast. Is this something that you and whomever else the powers are that be can come back to the table and say, okay, this timeline might not work. Let's come together and create one collectively. Because what we see now is you're telling us fall in line is what we want.
Well, we can certainly, the whole purpose of this is to get input. So obviously, we've heard loudly and clearly that you think we've prejudged everything. We have a plan behind the plan, which we don't, and that the timeline is too tight. So obviously, we're going to have to take that into consideration as we move forward because it's not going to work if people don't buy into it.
So Governor, what you have here is a bunch of hard workers, teachers that come in every day, that's here from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. We don't pick the kids that, you know, they get in their classrooms, and they try to treat every kid the same. You know, we got our kids that come from Jackson Street all the way up to Union. You know the kind of neighborhoods, Van Buren Street. Kids go down from 18th Street all the way down to 30th Street. So, you know, we don't pick our kids. So when the kids come in here, the teachers, you know, they get frustrated with all the trauma that we got to deal with, just trying to, you know, make sure they get their medications, make sure they go on task. They come into the classroom and learn. And we know no university can teach our teachers how to deal with our inner city kids. You know what I mean? I don't care what university you went to, you know, it's a different kind of atmosphere. And if you worked in a Title I school, you understand where we're coming from. So my question for you, Mr. Simmons, is I see in those 7 schools, the teacher turnaround rate was pretty high. Can you tell me why that is?
I didn't hear the
the teacher turnaround rate is pretty high. You have 7 schools up there, so I want to hear your reasoning.
Well, there's
My reasoning
yes, sir.
That those teachers aren't being supported correctly. I think, and I don't mean by you, obviously, Dr.
Yeah, absolutely.
Meaning, I don't think that we've supported them directly. I don't think we prepared them correctly. I've
Yes.
argued on different phone calls, and we could talk about that too,
Yes, sir.
around the fact that I'll use teacher mentoring for an example.
Mhm.
We mentor teachers in the city the same way as we do teachers in the suburbs, and they need a completely different level of mentoring and support around the differences that happen here, because those differences that happen here aren't happening in those other places. So we've got to revamp that piece. I think that's a huge part, because that helps with the burnout that we were talking about around teachers leaving quickly.
Absolutely, and I want to give my staff a shout out because, we're fully staffed in here. My staff come to work every day. I love what they do, and I really have to give my staff members a shout out. But what's happening is these teachers are getting burned out, and they're running to the suburban schools. So they come in here, getting their training, they'll stay here a year or two, and they get their training from a Title I school, and then we're losing those teachers because they're fed up, they're frustrated. They tired of dealing with Ron, Bam Bam, and all the kids who come from our communities. And you know what I'm talking about,
Absolutely.
Mr. Simmons. So, that Bam Bam and Ron that you had over at Mount Pleasant, you may probably have 100 of those. We have 420 kids here. We probably got about 415 of those.
Well, I
So
feel your pain,
that's the headache.
and you know, because we've talked, but
Absolutely.
I feel your pain because Mount Pleasant was a Title I eligible school. We just didn't declare it as Title I
Absolutely.
as our district reasons, right? So, but again, I think one of the things, and again, I don't have all the answers. If I did, I'd wave a wand to make it better for everybody.
Yes, sir.
I'm a teacher. My wife's a teacher.
Yes, sir.
I support education, public education, 100%, right? But what I am saying is, I want to have these conversations to find out what is it that makes this group stay and be so passionate and apply that to those other people to convince them to do the same thing. Because I think it is important to find out why you stay versus why you leave.
Hey, Simmons, I'm robbing Peter to pay Paul to keep these teachers. I'm telling you. I'm telling you, they come in, trust me.
But everybody doesn't see that potential. Trust and believe. I stay here because I grew up in this neighborhood. I'm a UD graduate, and when it comes down to it, I've seen people from University of Delaware come here and leave crying during student teaching. There is no mentoring program that's going to get you ready to walk in here and face these kids. Either you build for it or you're not. It's that simple.
Like we're here now. If you're really talking about how, why, when, let's get that information first, because I don't know how you build a security boat or you build a organization that's going to do better unless you have those answers. Because other than that, we're just doing the same thing. Because what you said earlier is you don't even have the data from Christina to say it really was better. So right now, we're just doing the same thing over again without really having the data. So I love what you said, and I love the idea. Why do we stay? Let's talk about it. So our next program, we build that in. So when we hire people for what's going to happen next, we instill that in them. So we're training people to start a program that we're actually saving the city, not just doing the same thing, and then putting another name on it. She keeps going.
So, just to piggyback off of what they said, we stay because we love to do it, but it also becomes our gift and our curse. Because I can leave and go work at my daughter's school in Christina, which is around the corner, make the same amount of money, but deal with less trauma, less drama. So, in essence, you really need to compensate us. You talk about smaller classroom sizes, that's great, but we work a whole lot harder than a lot of these other schools, so we need to be compensated as well.
That is one of the provisions. That is one of the pieces of the Christina MOU, just for the record. And we can get you that on paper if you don't believe me. What's that? What's, you talking about the, I don't think that's the case, but we can get that for you. Yes, ma'am.
I got two things. So the answer is, why do we stay? I don't even think we really know. We know why. We just can't, in our head, why we actually go through the actions every day. You know what I mean? My thing is, when are we going to stop sending our kids to places we wouldn't send our own kids to? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I literally treat kids like they're my own.
Yeah, I think that's the whole purpose of being here. That's the whole purpose of the idea, the whole purpose of putting more resources to it.
But we got to see more of y'all faces. You know what I mean? Like, in there. Like, y'all made this whole plan, right? But we haven't seen any board members come into the schools, come sit down in the class, and not with the cameras, not for the show time, but to come in and be a part and actually experience what we experience every day on a daily basis. You know what I mean? How do you, and even speaking of that, how are you able to come in and deal with multiple trauma kids and you personally not be traumatized yourself anymore? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How do you go home and not traumatize your own kids? How do you go, we laughing, but we laugh because it's serious. It's really that true. We are in a war. We're in a battle. I'm sure we prayed up every day to come into work and come in and do things. And back to that saying, when are we going to see y'all in the building experiencing what we experience? Because the only way, back to he said, the only way you really know what's going on in these classrooms, I'm not saying that you personally haven't been, but some of your board members, we don't even know who they are.
Let's think about the concept, right? The concept is to include people with that perspective on the board. My job is different. I visit schools all the time. I don't see, I'm sure, what you see because, people are prepared when I come and all the rest of it. But we will, and that's the model's different, we will engage and have teachers that are part of that process. That's why we're here tonight, to listen to what you have to say. I know you're skeptical of that, and I understand that, and it's based on people, I assume, not listening to you before, or not delivering when they promised you to do this or that or the other thing. All I can tell you is this is what we're going to do. We're going to do it with Christina because we already have those relationships. We'd like to include Red Clay and Brandywine. Mm-hmm. We need the board to decide to support us in doing that so that we can work out the issues that we've been talking about so that we could talk about the timeline. I think John explained the timeline that it's really to kind of get that trustee board up and running that looks at all the schools that are in the city that are part of the collaborative. People that talked about, you need any new curriculum is going to take you this amount of time and the professional development, all that, that's all understood and it'll be a process. But absent this, and I don't think you're obviously saying your voices aren't heard. So we're saying we're creating a mechanism where your voices will be heard. I know we're saying trust us and you don't. And all I can tell you is that I'm going to try to deliver that at least for the years that I'm going to be your governor.
Well, thank you. And I'm sorry because I have to go. And thank you for doing these meetings. And I just hope you go back and really express how we feel the exact way we said it. And I feel like we sugarcoat a lot of what's going on.
I haven't heard any sugarcoating, I hope.
No, ain't no sugar. It don't seem like it, but
I hope this isn't the sugar-coated version.
Right.
Because if it is, I'm in trouble.
Right.
But I might take you up on coming
We
to
love you, Governor, so we sugarcoating it. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. It's really, really, I just really hope y'all understand and y'all get
I hear you.
what we and the children are going through on a minute basis.
I hear you.
A day. I have never seen high IEP numbers like this in my life. It's sad.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
IEP numbers?
IEP numbers.
It's sad.
How many? The number of them?
Yeah, the numbers are out the roof to the point where you can't look at those numbers and just skip it and say everything is okay. There's no way. We all are smart and we all know those numbers are hierarchically terrible. And a lot of it has to do with the pandemic, but I mean, we can't put it on the kids. We can't. And they were high before the pandemic. It just made it even worse.
Right.
And now we just putting them in rooms together.
Yeah.
I just have a series of questions. Do I have to hear the microphone?
We have people on the.
All right. So, a couple questions. You keep talking about a board and that will be a part. I just wanted to know what is your process of selecting the people that you're going to place on the board?
Yeah, so.
And how can we make it equitable so that it really reflects the people who should be talking about what's going on?
So the general concept is the superintendent and the board member representing the city, and then a combination of teachers, parents, and others that represent the community. We haven't prejudged that.
Okay.
It's not a plan that's behind the plan. It's something that we want to hear from people. And then there's the sensitive part about it is how do they get appointed, right?
Yes.
Who appoints them,
Yeah.
right? So we've talked about the mayor appointing a person. Somebody mentioned, I guess it was a different meeting. I'm getting all confused with all the meetings I've been in. Maybe members appointed by the governor, that kind of thing.
Yeah. But
So we haven't finalized that just because we didn't want to prejudge that before.
Would it be like an application process, or would it just be something like a recommendation that maybe comes to you and then you, because I know you do that.
Usually the way I do
Yeah.
those is I seek out the organization. Say I would seek out the teachers' organizations and solicit names from them. And on the community side, if it were somebody in Wilmington, obviously I'm a Wilmingtonian, so I know a lot of people. I talk to the mayor, members of council, try to get somebody that could bring something to the board, and then parents, PTA, and other groups that, I'm sure you have parents that are engaged here and at other schools that we could reach out to. So that's the way I approach my job that way.
Okay, and then my second question is, I know that it was mentioned before regarding compensation and the fact that your term will be up, I believe, in 3 years. And we have all these things in place now. It sounds good. You're thinking about giving us compensation, which you have not mentioned a dollar amount, but I digress. What happens when those 3 years are up?
Do we know the dollar amount, Christina?
$4,000? Okay. But then besides that point she made, what happens when you leave office, or if you leave office, let's say it like that, does that compensation go away?
So I would hope not. I mean, the whole reason.
Can't
I'm
guarantee
sorry.
it.
The whole reason that we're here, that we're pouring so much energy in this, is to get the support of the community. If the community, I believe, if the community embraces it and it works, then it will continue on. And the other overlay here is I keep referring to the Reading Commission.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing work around, possibility of redistricting and other questions. And so that, whatever their recommendations will be brought into the picture as well.
But there's a possibility that can change at a later time if you're not in office.
Yeah, technically the legislature can change anything any given year, yeah. Okay. But it doesn't happen that way, particularly with things that work. I mean, one of the challenges, you mentioned all the challenges of the Wilmington Public Schools going way back, and I lived through it through my dad, who worked in the old Wilmington School District. And we still haven't been able to change things to address some of the things that we're all talking about. And that's why I just got frustrated and pulling my hair out and saying, we've got to do something, and this is our best thinking.
Okay, my final question. What happens if we just decide not to join this and be a part of it, and Red Clay said, no, we're not joining?
Yeah, I'd be very disappointed, and we'd continue our work with Christina and hopefully Brandywine, but I would hope that, that we wouldn't have to cross that bridge. I'm willing to spend some more time.
Yeah, no, another question right here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Actually, Governor, we just wanted to thank you. We know our time has come to an end, but we want to thank you for understanding that our teachers are very passionate about what they do. We love our kids. I can recall when I worked in the city schools and the suburban schools, I was very bored in the suburban schools. I had to come back to the city. I love these kids. They are victims of circumstance, and I wouldn't change what I do and how I do it for anything in the world. So we appreciate you for having a tough skin. And yes, this was the sugar-coated version of what we gave you, because our teachers truly are passionate. They pivot all the time. They are very flexible and understanding, and they work to make sure our kids have everything that they need. So we want to thank you again for coming out, and we appreciate your time tonight.
Well, thank you, and thank you for caring about your kids. Thank you for the emotion that you put into it. It's very obvious that you care about your kids. If this was the sugar-coated version, I'd hate to see the real thing.
Yeah.
I am really tempted to come. I was invited to come to Christina.
So you are a block and a half away.
I'll be there.
We would love to have you.
All right. Thank you very much. God bless you. Have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Appreciate it.